Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. If you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. I always appreciate it. And if you are new, thank you so much for clicking onto our video and seeing what this is about. Welcome. I am Lydia and this is Vintage Nectarines. So today I wanted to do a little bit of a spring summer book reading wrap up. If you've been following me for a long time, you know that I have been saying I was going to review all of the books that I read in April and in May and in June. And here it is the end of August and that hasn't happened. I have finished 13 books and started 3 additional books. So that is 16 books, which I felt like would take me a very long time to review all of them in depth. So what I'm going to do is simply just tell you all of the books that I read each month, what my star rating for those books were, and then I'm going to choose my favorite book from each month and review that. So again, if you've been following along for a while, you know that this year I gave myself the goal of trying to read books that went along with the color scheme. So in February, I read pink and red books. In March, I read green books. And then in April, I read blue books. I gave myself such an optimistic and very impossible list of books. I think I had 17 books on my blue April TBR. I finished 5 of them. I started 3 additional ones that month that did not get done. So, of the 5 books that I read, sorry, I have my notes here and I keep looking down, so if you're wondering what I'm doing, that's what I'm doing. Of the 5 books that I finished in April, I had Flunked by Calonita. I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was a really clever book and I loved that they kind of took Disney and combined it with like Mother Goose nursery rhymes in a way. I thought it was really clever and really fun, and I liked the storyline and the characters. I thought it was a great middle grade book. Next up, I have The Flight Girls by Noelle Salazar. I absolutely loved this book. It is about female pilots in World War II who were part of a training program to train male pilots. I fell in love with all of the characters and the storyline to this, and I definitely gave it 5 stars. And I found myself rooting for not only the main characters and their like progression through the story, but I really, really liked all of the women in the story as a whole. Next up was a super sweet book called The Curious Charms of Arthur Pepper by Phaedra Patrick. I actually ended up listening to the audiobook for this and I would definitely recommend it. This was such a sweet book. It didn't actually end up being a book that I like what I thought it was going to be about. For some reason, when I was reading the synopsis of it, I thought it was kind of like a murder mystery, which isn't at all what it turned out to be. But it was actually very sweet. It's about an older man whose wife passed away about a year ago, and in trying to get rid of her things, he comes across a charm bracelet that he has never seen before, and he kind of tries to figure out where it came from and realizes that all of the charms are special to her past in some way, but they are parts of her past that he didn't know anything about. And so he kind of starts to think that he didn't really know who his wife was and that she had this whole life that didn't involve him. But I was very pleasantly surprised with the way the book turned out. And I just really loved kind of getting a perspective of the older man in the story. I also read The Distant Hours by Kate Morton. I want to preface this by saying I absolutely love Kate Morton and she's probably one of my favorite authors. One of my very favorite books is by her. It's called The Forgotten Garden and I recommend that book to everyone all the time. I'm only giving The Distant Hours probably like a 3.5 to 4 stars. And I say that because there wasn't anything overly wrong with the story. It was a good story and I was very curious to kind of figure out what was happening. However, the book is over 500 pages long and I was a good 400 pages in before the story really went anywhere. I just felt like 400 pages of it were so slow. It took so long for it to kind of build up. So unfortunately, I'm giving it like 3.5 to 4 stars. It wasn't horrible. I didn't dislike it. I just felt like a lot of it wasn't necessary and it was really slow. And then the last book on the list was actually my favorite book this month, and I gave it 5 stars. I would actually give it way more than 5, and it is Seasons of the Storm. First of all, I have this absolutely beautiful exclusive dust jacket for it from the Bookish box, but it's by Elle Cosimano, and this book is unbelievable, and it's actually the first in a series, and I cannot wait to read the next one. It says, "This battle is not even lost. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. A perfect storm lies ahead. You can let it destroy you, or you can take control of it. How the story ends is up to you." This book is amazing. I don't often find a book where I'm not only completely invested in the storyline of the main characters, but the secondary cast of characters in this book, I almost liked even more. Like, I just love this story. So the book does actually start off with a content warning because it does discuss suicide and teenage death. I can honestly say in reading it, I didn't really feel that sense of suicide or teenage death. Yes, there are teenagers that died. So it says, choice number 1, live or die. One cold, crisp night, Jack Summers was faced with that choice: live forever according to the ancient magical rules of Gaia, or die. Jack chose to live, and in exchange, he became a winter. Like the other seasons, each year Jack must hunt and kill the one before him. Gaia's rules are pretty straightforward. Winter kills autumn, autumn kills summer, summer kills spring, and spring kills winter. Which means that Jack kills Amber. Amber kills Julio, Julio kills Flor, and Flor kills Jack. They die, they train, they hunt. But when Jack and Flor, winter and spring, fall for each other against all odds, the true brutality of their eternal lives becomes all too personal and all too painful, and Flor is on the brink of being purged forever, unless they can come up with a plan to stop the cycle. When the 4 seasons unite, risking immortality for a chance at love and to reclaim their free will, their cross-country escape brings them to a place where they must defend each other against a creator who seeks to destroy them all. Guys, this book, it's so amazing. So basically what happens is that at one point or another, for some reason or another, people die and are given the choice to become a season. So Jack, like he says, becomes winter, and he has to hunt down Amber, who is summer. And so it's kind of this continuous cycle. But when they're not in their season, when they're not alive, making the seasons change, they are kind of in this, I want to call it almost this like weird futuristic like boarding school for seasons and their handlers. I loved all of the season characters, but I also loved all of their handlers. And as you can hear from the synopsis, Flor falls in love basically with Jack, and they are winter and spring. And so she's constantly having to try and kill Jack so that winter can go away and spring can come back. But she never wants to do that. She always has a hard time doing it. And so it kind of sets off this whole plan of them trying to figure out some way of being together, because the seasons are not supposed to be together until they meet to end one season and begin a new one. This book was so clever. The storyline is amazing. It is such a unique idea, and I just absolutely love this book. Like I said, 5 stars. If I could give it more, I absolutely would. So this was my favorite blue book for April. And I cannot wait to get my hands on the next one. The other books that I started in April that I did not finish that I am still currently reading are Midnight at the Blackbird Cafe, Heather Weber, European Travel for the Monstrous Gentleman by Theodore Goss, which is the second after The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, which I read and reviewed in March. I absolutely love that book. I'm liking the second one just as much. It has introduced new characters such as Van Helsing, so it has been super fun. And then last but not least, I was reading out loud The Train to Impossible Places by P.G. Bell to my kids. We are absolutely loving it. It is a fun story, but we have not finished it yet. That was April. So in May, I was focusing on yellow books. And again in May, I finished 5. The first on the list was The Ladies of the Secret Circus by Constance Sayers. I absolutely love this book. It is dual time. So it's Paris in 1925 and the circus there, and then also in Virginia in 2004. The book starts with Laura, who is about to be married, and on her wedding day, her fiance does not show up. And, you know, people in the town assume that he just left her at the altar. But come to find out later that day, or I think a couple of days later, they find his car in the same place that several years before another car was found, with the person who was driving that also missing. It took circuses and, you know, early 1920s, 1930s circuses to a completely different place. It was a very unique story. It has dark moments, you know, magic, mystery, the underworld. I really, really loved it. Then I had Mirror, Mirror by Jen Calonita, which is a Disney twisted tale, and it is the retelling Snow White. I enjoyed this one. However, I decided to, in May, not only read yellow books, but kind of give myself a challenge of reading a couple of different Snow White retellings. This one was good. However, I feel as though the synopsis of the book didn't really do it justice, because really it kind of sets you off to think, okay, so I think the back of the book says something like, what if Snow White wasn't poisoned, but the prince was? And so you kind of assume that the prince is going to be poisoned and Snow White is going to kind of go on a journey to save him. And that's not exactly what happens in the book. And so I just kind of felt like it was a little bit of a letdown from what I was thinking it was going to be. The story as a whole was still good, and I would definitely recommend it. Of the twisted tales I've read, it is not my favorite, and I only gave it 3 stars. Next on the list was another Snow White retelling, and this one is also Mirror, Mirror, but it is by Gregory MaGuire, who is also the author of Wicked. So, it is not often that I give books less than 3 stars. It is also not often that I DNF books, do not finish them. I knew going into this book that it was going to be a little bit weird and different and twisted. Wicked was. Gregory MaGuire does a great job of taking classic stories and completely flipping them upside down and giving them a new life. So I kind of already knew going into this one that it would be that way. I gave this book 1 star. And honestly, I don't even feel as though it really requires that. I know I'm probably going to get some hate for that. And please feel free to tell me what you think in the comments below if you disagree with me. I did not finish this book. I detested it. I thought it was vulgar and inappropriate and sexualized in a way that wasn't necessary for the story. And I would 100% not recommend it. I didn't like it at all. So, next up on the list with a much happier ending was Twenties Girl by Sophia Kinsella. I thought this book was super cute and clever. It is kind of a contemporary romance, but it was just super lighthearted and fun. And I read this along with my friend Amber from The Most Magical 5, and it was just a fun, lighthearted, good kind of spring summery read. I gave that 4 stars. And last on the list, which was my favorite book for May, it is Grump, the fairly true tale of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs by Liesl Shirtliff. I love this book. It is a middle grade book. I absolutely adored it. It is probably my favorite Snow White retelling I have ever read because it is primarily told from the perspective of Grumpy, and I love Grumpy. But it was just such a unique take on this story, and I love that she kind of pulled from something that we don't usually think of. So if you've seen the Disney version of Snow White or read any of the Snow White stories, you know that the dwarves all mine for gems. Well, in Grump, it talks about like the fact that they don't mine for the gems because they think they're precious stones, and they actually think that we as humans are silly for thinking they're precious because they eat them. They are their food. But they also, the gems that the dwarves first get, like on their first mining experience, somehow that relates to their personality. Oh my goodness, it was such a cute story. Grump, however, gets really bored with being underground and mining, and he doesn't like it. And it's because he was born close to the surface. So he actually feels like suffocated when he's under the ground, which is where most of the dwarves want to be. And so one day he breaks out, which is like, no, it's a taboo. You're never supposed to go earthside, topside. And he breaks through the dirt and ends up with the evil queen, who kind of tricks him in a way to kind of give her what she wants. And so through that whole process, he's kind of tricked into doing the things that she tells him to. And he also ends up meeting Snow White. And so, yeah, it was just such a great story. There are other books in this series, which are Jack, which is about Jack and the Beanstalk, Rump, which is about Rumpelstiltskin, and Red, which is about Little Red Riding Hood. And I cannot wait to read the next ones. I'm actually going to read Jack next, I think, because I have that one currently. And so I am super excited to read that one. I gave this book, again, 5 stars, 100% recommend it. Like I was saying, it is middle grade, but it was just a really fun read and a super fun take on Snow White. Okay, and that takes us to June. And in the month of June, I focused on purple books. So June was my smallest book count of the year. I only finished 4 books in the month of June, but I still think that's great. So those books were Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I gave this book 4 stars. It was also a very fun narrative book, but it was about an apothecary who actually created serums or poisons to help women murder their husbands. And the main character from the modern timeline is in London, and she is down on the beach mudlarking, and she finds this bottle that kind of then sends her on a journey to figure out where the bottle came from. So it was a very interesting story. I did end up giving this book only 4 stars simply because I felt like it was a little bit predictable. The author did redeem herself, in my opinion, because the storyline was going very predictably, and then she kind of threw something into the mix a little bit that I was like, oh, that was clever. And so she did kind of save it for me in the end, but I still just felt like it was a little bit predictable and also kind of a little bit slow. The cover of this book, however, is stunning, and I would definitely recommend it. And then I also read Brood Awakening by Cleo Coyle, which is part of the Coffee House Mysteries series. And it's the one I read was like book 18. So the series itself like has all of the same characters, but it has standalone mysteries. So I read the last one, and I absolutely loved it. It takes place in New York, and the owner of the coffee shop wakes up on a bench and has no memory of the last, like, I think 12 or 13 years of her life. So she doesn't remember that her daughter is grown up. She doesn't remember that she's engaged. She thinks that her and her ex-husband just got divorced, and so she really doesn't like him. And she doesn't remember that they've actually built kind of a friendship. And when she went missing, there was also a New York heiress and hotel owner that went missing. And so through kind of getting her memories back, she figures out what happened to the hotel heiress. And it was just a really fun story. I gave it 4 stars, and I am excited to read some of the other books in the series. And then last on my list, which was my favorite series, Moonlight by Jen Bennett. I found this book, a local bookstore here in town called Aunties, and I didn't know anything about it. I have never read any of Jen's other books, but I was there and I saw the purple and I was like, I don't really have very many purple books, so I just decided to grab it. And when I read the back of it, I was like, ooh, that sounds really interesting. So I knew going in that it was probably going to be a little bit more of a lighthearted mystery, but I love all like cozy mysteries, murder mysteries, true crime books. And so it just really kind of sounded interesting. So it says, murder book aficionado Bertie Lindbergh has an overactive imagination. Raised in isolation and homeschooled by her strict grandparents, she's cultivated a whimsical fantasy life in which she plays the heroic detective and every stranger is a suspect. But her solitary world expands when she takes a job the summer before college working the graveyard shift at a historic Seattle hotel. In her new job, Bertie hopes to blossom from introverted dreamer to brave pioneer, and gregarious Daniel Akai volunteers himself as guide. The hotel's charismatic young van driver shares the same nocturnal shift and patronizes the waterfront Moonlight diner, where Bertie waits for the early morning ferry after work. Daniel also shares her appetite for intrigue and stumbles upon a real-life mystery. A famous reclusive writer never before seen in public might secretly be meeting someone at the hotel. To uncover the writer's puzzling identity, Bertie must come out of her shell, discovering the most confounding mystery of all may be her growing feelings for the elusive riddle that is Daniel. So I absolutely loved this book. I love Bertie. I can honestly say of all of the books I have read this year, Daniel was my absolute favorite guy character I have read. I love him. I love him so much. He's sweet, he's funny, he's troubled, he has so many layers to him. He really kind of has this fun, playful side that Bertie really kind of needs. So Bertie lives with her grandparents because her mother died, and her mother had her when she was pretty young, and so she was kind of ostracized by her parents. And so when Bertie's mom dies, her grandparents take her in and decide that they will not raise her the way they raised her mother. And so she becomes homeschooled and she never really gets to do anything. But then Bertie's grandmother dies and her grandfather is left to raise her. And so he kind of lets her spread her wings. So she goes and gets a job at a hotel in Seattle. Part of what I loved about this book is that we're from Spokane and Seattle's only a couple hours away. I have been to all of the places that are in this book. I've been to the island where she catches the ferry. I have been to the hotel that inspired the hotel in this book. I've been to Pike Place. I've been to the diner that inspired the diner in this book. So it was really fun to kind of read the story and like be able to actually vividly picture the places in my head. But she also has a godmother, Bertie does, and I'm blanking on her godmother's name at this very moment, but she was her mother's best friend, and she's kind of this really eccentric artist who a lot of times creates these crazy outfits to wear, one of which is like a Mad Hatter's type costume. And so she's just a really fun character. Bertie's a fun character. I love Daniel and Daniel's family. And so they start working at this hotel together after an interesting first meeting. And Daniel tries to kind of get her involved in having a friendship with him by telling her about this elusive author who's meeting at the hotel, and kind of build this friendship based around the idea that they're going to try to solve this mystery of why the author is there. The mystery took a turn that was like completely different, but it was just such a fun story. I loved this book so much. I laughed, I cried. It was so great. And I buddy read this with my sweet friend Amber, and we really enjoyed it. So I gave this book 5 stars. Again, if I could give it more, I definitely would. I loved this book so very much. So those are the 13 books that I finished between April, May, and June. If you have read any of these books, please let me know in the comments below. Do you agree with my star rating? Do you disagree? If you haven't read any of these books, do any of them sound interesting to you? So I am really looking forward to my upcoming books. But then starting in September, I get to read all of my like spooky fall books. And I'm going to be reading all black and orange books throughout the months of September and October, and I'm so excited. And then November will be brown books, and then in December I will end the year with white books, and I'm super excited. I have been waiting for all of my kind of fall spooky true crime mystery books, and most of them fall into my black spined books. I'm very excited. So I will hopefully be reviewing my September and October books. But you know, you just never know. Life happens, and sometimes I don't get around to it. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you didn't like it, you can also let us know that too. And yeah, if you haven't done so already, please click that subscribe button so you can be notified anytime we have new content here. We do so many different things on this channel. We have bookish content, DIYs, and lots of Disney content, unboxings, family vlogs, and we are also a homeschooling family, so we do on occasion have homeschool content as well. So thank you so much for hanging out. I will see you very soon. Bye.